In every corner of America, there are stories of resilience, innovation, and the unwavering spirit of community. Welcome to The Community Effect, the podcast where we explore the intersection of community development, affordable housing, and the impact it has on us all. The Community Effect, a podcast hosted by Marietta Rodriguez, President and CEO of NeighborWorks America.
Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the Community Effect podcast. Today, we are talking about one of the most significant steps many people will take in their lives, and that is buying a home or achieving homeownership. The journey to a first home can be a long and complicated one, but NeighborWorks and our partners design tools and have people to make the process a little bit easier. Joining me today to talk about some of those resources and how you can access them is Jason Peterson. He's the executive director of NeighborWorks Home Partners, an organization based in St. Paul, Minnesota, that helps residents of the Twin Cities realize their dream of homeownership. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Marietta. Thank you for having me.
We're really excited for this conversation. Let's start by acknowledging the challenges that people face on the homeownership journey, because there are many. What are the financial hurdles that your team sees the most?
Yeah, still inventory is a challenge. There just are not enough houses for sale out there. A healthy housing market has 4 to 6 months of available inventory. It's easing a bit. It's about 4 months across the United States, but here in the Twin Cities, it's less than 3 months. So that's certainly a challenge. A second challenge we see is the cost. The cost of homeownership has really increased, as is the cost of housing in general. We've seen prices increase upwards of 50% in the last 5 years in many of the neighborhoods that we serve. And couple that with the rising mortgage rates, the cost of insurance, we've really seen. While there are a number of myths out there about needing 20% down and different pieces like that that just aren't true, there still is that initial financial barrier to homeownership.
And what are the ways that NeighborWorks Home Partners helps support someone who's interested in buying a home?
Yes, first and foremost, I think it's going to be getting that knowledge and those tools and those resources. It's that home buyer education, it's the one-on-one home ownership advising. So that's delivered in a group setting or in an online setting, and that provides a really great overview of what to expect. And looking at your individual situation and finding out, hey, these are the things that I need to work on. I might need to decrease my debt. I might need to look at my budget. And so it's really working on those key pieces with a HUD-approved counselor. The nice piece about something that has come up after the COVID pandemic is going to be the ability to do a lot of the services virtual. So I know in our organization, we're really able to help folks with those services all across the state of Minnesota. And I know a number of our NeighborWorks America peers all across the country are able to do that as well.
I think a lot of people who may be looking to buy a home or interested in home ownership don't realize that there are these free services that can help them learn how to buy a home, learn about all the people that you encounter when you buy a home, a realtor, an insurance agent, an inspector, a mortgage lender, and they all play a different role. But we don't buy homes every day. So having someone guide us through and share what's happening in that community, I think that's one of the biggest secrets to home buying, is that there are home buyer coaches and counselors out there that will really ride alongside you every step of the way. It can make a big difference.
Yeah, it can make a huge difference. Working with a HUD-approved counselor is a really important piece, but then our organization, our partner organizations then really tap into the industry professionals. So as you mentioned, in our home buyer education, we bring in a loan officer, a realtor, a home inspector. And so really having those professionals in to talk about what they do every day, but then also have that either that one-on-one engagement or that group engagement to talk about that after each home buyer education workshop. And over 90% of our survey respondents, their response to a question of what would you have done different is, I would have taken this class sooner.
Jason, if someone is in St. Paul, Minnesota, obviously, or in the Twin Cities, they can look for NeighborWorks Home Partners to hook up with a housing counselor, a home purchase advisor. But if you're not fortunate to be in the Twin Cities, where could you find these services?
Fortunately, HUD nationally does keep a database now of HUD-approved counselors and HUD-approved counseling agencies. So that is a great place to start, is HUD's website. Also, I would encourage folks to check out NeighborWorks America's website because NeighborWorks America has great organizations all across the country that provide similar services.
Obviously, homeownership is a critical tool for stability of a family, but also for building wealth within that family. And not just for the family that lives in the home, but we've seen generational and family wealth grow from owning property in this country. Unfortunately, we've seen so many communities of color and low wealth communities left out of this opportunity. I know that you've designed some programs that are really addressing the racial inequities in homeownership straight on. Tell us a little bit about some of those efforts.
Yeah, so in the state of Minnesota, we are in the unfortunate position to have one of the larger racial disparity gaps in homeownership in the country. Just to give a specific example, in 1950, 46% of Black families owned a home. In 2020, 7 years later, and only 25% of Black families own a home. So that decreased by 20%. So we certainly have some very large disparities here in Minnesota. One tool that we started to pilot in 2017 was a first generation down payment assistance program. A key component of homeownership is wealth generation. The average homeowner has net wealth of about $250,000. The average renter has a net wealth of about $6,000. And so a first generation buyer is not likely to have that family wealth to make that initial down payment. So a focus for our program was that first generation piece. We piloted that program for about 3 years and found out that over 90% of the folks utilizing that program represented BIPOC communities. And so we worked with our state legislators and our state finance agency. And in 2023, we were able to launch a $150 million first generation down payment assistance program here in the state of Minnesota. That program now, a third of the dollars have been utilized, and about 80% of those dollars are going to BIPOC families to purchase
Wow.
a home.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
with that program, what can someone expect to receive in down payment assistance?
Yes. So that program you can expect to receive under the way it's currently structured is about $32,000, between $32 and $35,000. Our average home price here is about $320,000. So that's about 10% of the purchase price. So that's a significant amount. What's important for us in the way that program is structured is it is structured in a forgivable manner. And so it forgives over a 5-year period.
So if the family or the buyer sells that home before that 5-year term, then they would pay a portion of that back to the fund.
That's correct. Yep. It's prorated based on that. Correct.
So essentially, you're like everybody's rich uncle.
Essentially, what we're really trying to do is even the playing field. I was fortunate when I was younger. My parents were able to provide me with a small down payment. I bought a very modest home, but that was the reason I was able to do that. And there are a lot of folks that aren't able to do that. So that's really our goal, is to really focus on them.
Your organization built a great capacity to make down payment assistance loans through a program called Lift. Am I right about that?
Yep. The Neighborhood Lift program was a great program for our organization and our markets, as it also provided a significant amount of down payment in a forgivable manner. There was at one point when almost 4% of the transactions occurring in Minneapolis and St. Paul had a Lyft loan attached to it. So it had real
Amazing.
impact. It was really amazing. But not only did it impact so positively the community, but also our organization. It provided us not only the capital, but also the technical assistance and the expertise. We were able to get the systems we needed in place, bring on the staff, and most importantly, I think, show that not only could we do this, but it can be done at a large scale. And when I was testifying for this first generation down payment program, one of the questions was there enough inventory? And this was in 2023. And we had just finished up our most recent round of Lyft. And I was able to point back to, we have had success at that scale with the program post pandemic. And so really highlighting like this works not only for an organization, but also within the community.
For those of you that may not realize, Lyft was an initiative where NeighborWorks partnered with Wells Fargo to provide down payment assistance to ultimately over a 12-year period, 25,000 people and over 80 markets nationwide, including Minnesota. And it really did jumpstart the market for first-time homebuyers. Right now, Jason, you're also running a pilot program for halal mortgage financing. What does that program look like?
Yeah, so we also piloted a program about 2018 working with fee-based first mortgage financing. And so those are folks that are accessing fee-based lending who are interest adverse. That is an area we have a larger population within Minnesota that seeks to access that type of program. And there was not resources available for the down payment. Most of the down payment assistance did not pair with fee-based first mortgage financing. And so we had such success with that that we actually went to our state legislature in 2023 to seek some additional dollars to bring that statewide. When we received a $10 million appropriation to be able to really expand that work.
And tell us about when you say fee based, how is that different than another lender, for example?
There's no interest involved in the transaction, and so that's the big difference. While there is not interest, there are fees, so the cost is not less. So I do wanna highlight this isn't an interest-free program. It is just structured differently where due to religious purposes, interest is not something that is acceptable within a real estate transaction for certain communities, and so it's structured as a fee-based, and so we structure our program and work with first mortgage lenders who are working with that community.
What I'm hearing from you, and I think is an important point, is flexibility and meeting the customer where they are is really critical. Are there other examples where your organization has been able to be more flexible than what you might see in a traditional financial institution?
Yeah, I think that's critical, especially as we're looking at focusing on addressing the racial disparity gap. Another example is we are participating with two partner organizations on a special purpose credit program right now. So, this down payment program focuses on serving foundational Black families. So, these are families that have been traditionally not served, but have been living in the United States now for centuries. And so this program provides some significant down payment assistance to foundational Black families. Another example I'd like to raise up would be we're about to launch a unique first mortgage program that will be serving folks buying manufactured homes on cooperatively owned land. And so this is a really unique place that's hasn't had a lot of interest, hasn't had a lot of willingness from traditional lenders, but has a huge need. You can purchase a manufactured home in Minnesota for about $150,000. And so it's one of the few kind of really affordable places to do that. And unfortunately, a lot of the manufactured home parks in our states are owned by investors. And so that's really challenging. So we're partnering with a great partner, North Country Cooperative Foundation, who works to organize these co-ops so folks will be able to buy and own their land, own their space, and then we are financing those. So
Those are great examples. I love the manufactured housing work there. I think that's a market that has been ignored for a long time and unsupported. So, congratulations on that work. Let's zoom into the homeowner. We talked about homebuyer education, getting that done, but let's even, zoom out. If you may not be ready to buy today, but it's something you want to do, how would you recommend someone get ready for the purchase?
the first step that I would suggest is to connect with a HUD certified housing counselor. The first question to find out is where you're at in that home ownership journey and how close you are to being ready. Your credit score affects the type of mortgage you can get and the rates you can get, your savings, your debt. And a big thing is understanding then too what you can afford. So just because you might be pre-approved for a certain amount with a first mortgage lender, like what can you afford? You never know when that right opportunity is going to come for you. So I would really strongly suggest that if you work with a HUD approved housing counselor, they're going to be able to provide that roadmap for you on what that looks like and whether or not that is 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. One of our counselors just celebrated the purchase of a home with one of their clients who they had worked with for over 10 years.
Wow.
And so, you never know when that's going to be. So that would really be my first step.
I'm wondering if you think the pandemic changed the housing market significantly.
Yes, it did for sure. I think one of the challenges that we still see is the inventory piece. Coming out of the Great Recession, we definitely had a number of home builders that moved out of that market here. That did start to pick up, but then when COVID hit, we had a number of folks that moved back out of that space. I think an opportunity certainly is the shift in where folks can work and the work from home environment. The other piece that we've seen change a bit in our market specifically is more shared equity opportunities. So that would be maybe purchasing in a land trust or looking at a cooperative opportunity, looking at accessory dwelling units. And so there's been some interesting opportunities for ownership that I don't think were as present. And I think that that has come about also as a result of this pandemic and people really looking at where they want to spend their time when they're spending their time. So I think that there's some cool things that are happening that came as a result of that, but there's a lot more opportunity.
I think that is something that we'll see more proliferation, and that may dictate the kind of home you're looking for. You may need more space to accommodate a workplace or a desk. You mentioned shared equity and you gave us some examples, but for someone who may not be completely familiar with the term, unpack that a little bit for us.
Sure. So in a traditional home ownership situation, somebody would say own a single family home. So they would own that home on their own. There's shared equity situations where really that equity is shared, that ownership is shared. So looking at, for example, a land trust model. In that case, somebody does own their home, but they are leasing their land, but they are then working with that community-based nonprofit with that property to be able to have an ownership opportunity, and then when they move on, that remains a home ownership opportunity for others. If you look at different co-op models, it's folks coming together that may not have been able to purchase on their own to purchase that together. That's very powerful. So you then get to make decisions, you get to have control, and then you do have equity out of that. It is shared, but you do have that equity.
And are you finding in those situations resale is a challenge? Because it's a little bit of a different flavor of homeownership?
We are not finding that as a challenge at all. If you look at the land trust model, usually if somebody purchases a land trust home, it's usually at a much more affordable purchase price. When they do choose to sell, they do not get the entire appreciation of the equity in that time. That is shared and that is actually reinvested back into the property. But we've seen no challenges with folks being able to sell that. You walk away with less money, but the amount you need to get into homeownership is also less.
I think your organization has done an incredible job of really understanding the market dynamics and what the needs are with the programs that you've discussed. Let's look a little bit into the future. What do you think you'll be working on in the next decade?
Something that is really starting to be more of a focus for us is going to be that home ownership preservation. For us, we've started to do more post-purchase advising. We've incorporated this into some of our programs to really provide that ongoing support. As we're working with folks that might be first generation home buyers or folks that don't have that experience, it's really helping folks understand what home ownership is. And then we've been able to tie that to some financial incentives. We were just working with a family who purchased about 6 months ago. And through this post purchase opportunity, we were able to provide a $5,000 grant and their water heater went out. So we were able to cover that cost. I think on the purchase side, I think we're going to see more shared equity. I really think we are. It's a way for folks to get into properties in a more affordable way. And I do think that we're going to see a lot more folks that are going to be moving away from some of the urban cores, but also different types of structures within the urban core. So I'll give you a specific example. In the city of Minneapolis, they actually lifted a lot of the residential zoning requirements. And so now there's a lot more opportunity to build accessory dwelling units or other different types of structures where you can have a little more density, which is an important piece because, again, we need more places for folks to live. So those are areas that I think we'll continue to see growth in.
One of the things that I think is truly remarkable about your work and your story in the Twin Cities is you've been able to build capacity to take some of these more specialized programs online, but also take them to scale. And you've been able to access state funding or government funding in a way that has really not been available. How were you able to serve up your capacity so that it garnered political will to also invest?
I will go back to Neighborhood Lift and some other really great capacity building support that NeighborWorks America has provided. That's really been important for us to be able to show that we can do this well at scale. Once we're able to show that, we really started small. So we started working with cities, doing down payment and home repair programs within a number of cities around the Twin Cities. And then we started working with counties. And then we really started working with legislators. But it was a lot of time. We spent a lot of time with legislators. I spent a lot of time testifying, but well worth it. It's been really exciting to really sit down with legislators and talk through solutions that we've proved the concept out. And they're really excited about that.
And it seems like it's a nonpartisan issue.
Yes, it is a nonpartisan issue. Actually, we had the bill come forward 2 years in a row. The first year, we actually had a Republican put the bill forward. The second year, we had a Democrat put the bill forward, and we had support from both sides of the aisle. So,
One thing we haven't spoken about, but I'm sure is top of mind, particularly being in a state like Minnesota, but how do you think about climate and climate resilience shaping the journey of a home buyer?
yeah, that's a really important piece, especially as we focus on some models that haven't been focused on before, such as manufactured housing and some of these different pieces. I mean, certainly, the extreme weather that we face in Minnesota is different, across other parts, but we still have a lot of extreme weather. So, what we've been really focused on our home repair side, but then also when we help folks buy homes is making sure that you're understanding what you're getting into and the cost of that because you can get into situations where you're not thinking about what that extreme weather or what that climate change might do to that. And so
Home buying can be very seductive, right? You fall in love with the house, you're starting to picture your furniture there or what your yard is going to look like. I don't know, you're pretty busy and your organization is pretty busy, so you may not go to very many home closings, but when you or your team hands over the keys to a brand new homeowner, tell us about what that emotion is.
yeah, it's why we do it. It's why we get up every day. It's just the thrill of it's amazing. We work with so many people that never thought it would be achievable. And you walk into the closings where there's kids and they're like, I can't wait to get to my room. I can't wait to have a room. It's just incredible. And in any given year, we help about 300 families buy a home. We help about 150 families keep their home. We're always so thrilled and so happy for each and every family.
It's changed their lives
It's
forever.
forever. Yes. Yes. It's amazing.
Well, Jason, I've really enjoyed hearing about these programs, enjoyed hearing about what you're doing. It's incredible. Thank you for what your team and what you do every single day in Minnesota for the Twin Cities. It's remarkable. And please continue doing what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Marietta. And I greatly appreciate NeighborWorks America's support in our work.
As we wrap up today's episode, I want to encourage all of our listeners to check out NeighborWorks America's homeownership programs at www.neighborworks.org, especially for those of you that are looking to take the next step in buying your first home. There is a directory. You can look up a NeighborWorks organization. We have organizations in every state, including the District of Columbia and in Puerto Rico. Thank you, Jason, for joining us today, and thank you, listeners, for joining us. Till next time, this is The Community Effect.
This is The Community Effect, brought to you by NeighborWorks America.